Good morning from Vietnam. Good afternoon to you all. Thanks a lot for spending your beautiful afternoon to join our program and share your amazing stories to our global audience. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, I want to say thank you.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, before we start our conversation, I would like to ask, where are you now? Are you in Seattle or are you in Long Beach?
No, I'm in Palm Springs, California, which is about 100 miles due east of Los Angeles.
Wow. Okay. So hello from Vietnam. Since your wife been here, your for 3 weeks, but you haven't been to Vietnam yet. So please accept our invitation in advance if you decided to travel here. Now you have a new family, a new friend is waiting for you to come. Okay.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay. And Howard, in our culture, it's very honored if we can have you to share a little bit about who you are and what you are doing now to our audience. Would you please do that?
Sure. So you're talking to a guy that's 80 years old, and I barely got out of high school. I only had 2 years of community college, and I went to work. I started working actually when I was 13, and I have worked ever since. And I pretty much have been in consumer-oriented companies my whole life, both family businesses and other businesses, and I got interested in the idea of servant leadership when I was in my mid-20s, and was a follower of servant leadership, and over time I became a conscious competent, which means that I understood servant leadership and I could teach it. And that was my goal, to be able to teach other people about servant leadership. So when I was in my mid-40s, I joined this little tiny coffee company called Starbucks. It had 28 stores. When I started, when I retired, it had 15,000 stores. And I was the founding president of Starbucks International. I was on the board of Starbucks for 12 years. I've been on the board of many public companies and private companies, as well as nonprofits. And now I'm really focused on bringing servant leadership to the world.
Wow. Oh, well, you have an amazing journey that you introduced to us, and the counter time here less than 90 seconds. So that's not fair for our audience. We're going to dive into this conversation to know more about the journey that leading to the amazing and phenomenal journey that you have. Okay?
Okay.
All righty. So I want to bring you all the way to when you were little. So time travel with me. When I was little, I grew up in a city called Da Nang, so it's in the middle of Vietnam. And back then, we have one day with electricity, and the next day or two, we're not going to have electricity. So my whole childhood grow up is fascinating for me to see the light at night when the moon rises, right? So so my first dream about what I would do in this world when I grow up is to become an astronaut and get into the moon and see how beautiful it is, how bright it is up there. But life didn't give me any opportunity to do what I dreamt of doing. So, Howard, when you were little, what was your first dream about the future works that you were going to do?
Well, like I told you, I grew up as the son of two immigrants to the United States. My father came to the United States, couldn't speak English, and he had to learn the language, and he worked in what's called a public market, where a produce market. And he saved his pennies, nickels, and dimes and opened up a small mom and pop grocery store in a neighborhood of Seattle. And that's how I grew up. And he met my mother in Seattle, who was also an immigrant. And they worked together to build this little small grocery store. And we never had much, but we always had food on the table. And sometimes the fruit was bruised and brown, and the vegetables were brown, but we always had food. And so when I was young, I was raised, I was the baby of the family. My sister was 14 years older. My brother is 10 years older. My sister has passed away a few years ago. My brother is still alive. He's 10 years older than I am. He's 90. Anyway, so I grew up in retail, and I got interested in retail, and I started working in the family's business when I was about 13 years old. And over time, I developed a love for retail, and primarily I did because retail is about people. It's about serving people. And I just love to be around people, and I always tried to build relationships as I grew up. And over time, I got better at doing that and more knowledgeable about it, and more attached to the idea that we're all here to serve other people. Nobody is put on this earth except to serve other human beings. No matter what we think our job is, what the title of our job, doctor, lawyer, fire chief, architect, engineer, it doesn't make any difference what you do. It's still about serving others. And so that's what I learned growing up, because that was what my father was. You know, he had this small mom and pop grocery store that was in a neighborhood. His customers were his friends and his neighbors. They weren't just his customers. And so I learned all those skills from my mom and my dad, and I attached to those things. And so as I grew, I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I got better at it over time. And I worked in family businesses, and then I ended up going to work for some other companies that were outside the fabric businesses, and I gained some really good skills of doing that. But my dreams were my dreams were to build relationships. That's if I love being around people. I like to learn from people. I love being around older people than I was and younger people, because I learned from both of them, and that has continued on to this day. Still, my life is built around building relationships, and that's what I enjoy. And those were my dreams. And as I got older, I started to set goals for myself. I wanted to someday run my own company. Someday I wanted to learn all about servant leadership, and I wanted to have a family, which I did. And now I have 6 grandchildren and 2 children, and so I have a wonderful family and a wonderful life. And it was all because of retail, all because I got interested in serving people in a retail environment, and that has continued on.
Wow. So it's all about relationship, right? So that little young Howard believe in building relationship. Has he know that one day he's gonna have ability to build relationship globally?
I never saw that coming. No, my dreams were not of that big. My dreams were just small dreams. But over time, the dreams got bigger. I set goals for myself, how I wanted to grow as a person, how much money I wanted to earn, what responsibilities I wanted to have. And so I had lots of different goals. But then when I got to Starbucks, it was this little tiny company. It was 28 stores, and I had the opportunity to build it. When I retired, there were 15,000. And so I helped grow that company, but along that journey, I grew myself. And I learned about, how to operate in a large company environment, and I became the founding president of Starbucks International, which I grew it from 0 stores to, by the time I retired, we had about 8,000 stores outside the United States. And now we have 37,000 stores in 90-some countries around the world. And I got the opportunity to start that business and to build that business and to grow it. And so my dreams weren't that big, but the more I did, the more I accomplished, the bigger my dreams got,
Wow.
And so I was lucky. I got the opportunity, and I signed on for the opportunity, but I also, I brought the idea of servant leadership to Starbucks.
So the servant leadership, I believe that you got that inherited from your father, right? So he seems to be a very wise gentleman. So tell us, how did you come up with that idea about servant leadership? By watching your father and role model him?
Well, in those days when I watched my father and watched how he served those people he called customers, I didn't understand what it was. I just knew that this is what his values were, and that's how he wanted to treat people. And when I was in my mid-20s, somebody introduced me to this little book called The Servant, or The Leader as Servant. It was written by a man named Robert Greenleaf. Robert Greenleaf was the head of organizational development for American Telephone and Telegraph in the 1940s and the 1950s, which at that time was the largest company in the world. And when Robert Greenleaf retired, he looked back at his career and he said, who are the leaders that really made things happen? And he came to the conclusion it was the leaders that intrinsically understood that their role was to serve people, not be served by people. And so he coined this term servant leadership. And after reading that pamphlet, I started to become curious about, okay, what is this all really all about? And he'd written a number of books, and there are other people that had written books about servant leadership, and I got really interested in it. And so I started to learn, and I went from being what I call an unconscious competent. I did the work, but I didn't understand what I was doing. I was just doing it. I was copying somebody else, so to speak. But over time, as I read more and studied more about Robert Greenleaf and Peter Drucker's work, who was a professor in leadership studies at UCLA in Southern California, and I started to get curious. And so I became a student of servant leadership. And over time, I started to develop my own ideas, my own opinions about servant leadership, and I became what is called a conscious competent. So I understood what I was doing, I understood the basics of servant leadership, and I could teach them. And here are the basic level ideas of servant leadership. As a leader, your primary responsibility is to help people grow as human beings, help them become better human beings. Number two, help them grow as professionals, help them be better at the work they've chosen to do. And number three, help them achieve their own personal goals in life. And so I became really good at doing that and helping people. I became known as a servant leader in the business community around the United States. And since that time, it's been over 50 years. I still learn every day about servant leadership. I still try to be better at what I do and be a better servant to other human beings. Because I said to you before, there's only one reason any of us exist, and that's to serve other human beings.
Wow. Howard, you probably have read so many things in your life before you read what Robert were, the book about servant leadership, right? So it could be any other topic that you got curiosity in to research and to deep dive in. So why that piece of idea resonated to you, to that young Howard, that he spent many years to be at the conscious competence on that one?
Well, because remember I said I like building relationships and I love being around people. And so that fit. It just fit who I was. I didn't know what it meant. I'd never heard the word servant leadership before, but I had been a person that really cared about people and I intrinsically wanted to serve people, but I had no knowledge about it. I was just being, without any knowledge. But as I gained knowledge about it, I realized this is something that everybody can learn and everybody can do. And so it's not just, not just because I had a father that was that way. It was, I learned as I grew, and I teach people about how to be a servant leader and servant leadership isn't, it's about, at its primary core, it's not just soft stuff. It's about the hard stuff. It's about performance at its basis. It's about getting the job done, but it's about getting the job done with people, not on the backs of people. And servant leadership, in my mind, is the best way to lead an organization because it has the longevity to it. Because there's an old saying: people don't care how much you know; they want to know how much you care. Mm-hmm. And that's what leadership is about. It is not about knowing; it's about caring.
Wow. So yeah. Yes, please. You were about to say something.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So Howard, do you still remember the age when you first introduced to that book?
Yeah, I was about 26.
26. So that's prior to when you becoming a member of Starbucks.
Oh, way before. I didn't become a member of Starbucks for another almost 20 years.
Okay. The reason I asked for you is because a lot of us out there maybe got curious about something for a little time, then move to the next one, a little time to move to the next time, a little time. You've been carrying it with you for 50 plus years. Okay, so I want to bring you to that moment when you read that book and the idea of servant leaders becoming, like embedded into your body, right? So what did you decide to do right after that?
Well, I wanted to put it into practice. I wanted to prove that the theories were good, that they held water, so to speak, that you could build a profitable business by taking care of your people, not abusing your people. You could build a profitable business by not using your people, but helping your people. You could build a profitable business by helping your people grow. Here's a little equation I like to use. You grow the people grow the organization, and the organization grows the business. And it's kind of in that way. And so I wanted to prove that those theories were right because I agreed with them. I didn't know why they worked, but after a while I started to understand why they worked and how they worked. I could teach it and I could do it.
Beautiful. And I want to understand in your own word, okay? What is the definition of a servant leader?
A servant leader is a person that intrinsically understands their role is to serve the people that report to them. That everything begins and ends with that. And when you do that well, then they want to serve you. They want to help you. When you abuse your people, when you manipulate your people, then they don't want to help you. They may say they will, but they don't do it from their heart and for their soul. And so that's why I believed in it, is because I saw as I started to practice servant leadership, in its more formal form, I started to understand that it was probably the most productive way of leading an organization. And it was people signed on to the greater purpose of the organization. They wanted to help the organization grow. And that was because they felt respected and they felt like they mattered. And too often in life, and in particularly the business world, employees are just a means to the end for the boss. The boss wants to make money. The boss wants to be successful. And so their people are just there to serve them in that journey. If you really want to build a highly successful company over a long period of time, then the goal should be to help your people grow first. And when you do that well, then they want to help you. And so that's what I learned, and that's what I have been driving my whole life. And I've seen it I've been on the opposite side, by the way. I for companies that were not servant-led, that were abusive to their people. They didn't really care about their people. And then I've worked for companies that really cared. And the ones that really cared were the ones I found to be the most successful over the long period of time.
Wow. And in the 55 plus years being as a servant leader and have been teaching other leaders to become servant leaders yourself, right? So what changed significantly that you see from the age of 25 until now in servant leadership?
What changed? I increasingly got more opportunity to have more responsibility. I increasingly got the opportunity to bring servant leadership to bear in the organizations that I was working in. I became known for that, and I became really good at it. And to tell you the truth, I mean, that's the gift that I gave to Starbucks, was servant leadership. And it was the thing that I drove with inside of Starbucks. And, that to me, when you really boil down Starbucks success, it's all been about the people. It hasn't, anybody can make coffee. Anybody can open retail stores. But not very many people can serve their people well because they get so caught up in themselves, they forget that it's about the people that they're serving. And that's what I did. That's what I brought to the organization, and it's still alive today. I coined this phrase at Starbucks. We weren't in the coffee business serving people. We were in the people business serving coffee.
Wow.
Small play on words, but very important. Very different. When you see it in those terms, you do things differently.
Wow. But I also remember that you decided not to join Starbucks at the beginning, right? Right. So what happened? How that incident happened?
What happened was I met that young guy who was CEO at the time, and he was looking for somebody to be his vice president of operations. And so we had breakfast, and he was interviewing me, and he had a list of criteria, 10 criteria. And the first criteria, he wanted somebody with a college degree. I didn't have that. The second criteria, he wanted somebody that had food service experience. I didn't have that. Finally, we got down to number 10, can I breathe? That was about the only thing I could do, is I could breathe. And we decided at that point in time, and I was actually looking for a business to buy at that point in time, but we decided that we weren't the right fit for each other. And a year passed, and he still hadn't filled his vice president of retail operations, and I hadn't found a business to buy. And we got back together again, and I said to him, let me work in the company for a week for free. Okay, I just work in the company. I want to work in the roasting plant. I want to work in the stores. I want to work on the delivery trucks. And at the end of that week, let's get back together again and talk. And at the end of that week, I fell in love with Starbucks, and fortunately, he saw what I could do and how I could impact the organization. And so he offered me to start at Starbucks. And so I just turned right instead of turning left. I didn't buy my own company, but I ended up working for this little company, and I became, I get a great opportunity to influence the organization. And it was a gift. It was a gift. I loved Starbucks right from the beginning because the coffee business is a people-centric business. And so it fit me perfectly.
Wow. Wow. You were very determined when you say, okay, you are going to work for the company for 1 week without pay. Yeah. I want to bring you to that moment. Okay.
Yeah.
What made you decide to do that?
Well, let me give you my father's story.
Okay, please.
So when I was about 9 years old, I used to go to my father's grocery store every day after school. So, I didn't do anything. I fooled around, but I'd hung up by the cash register when he was ringing a customer up. So one day he said to me, he said, Howard, go get me a couple of baskets of strawberries. And I brought him the strawberries, and he took the strawberries and he put them in the customer's bag, and the customer walked out the door. Well, I was old enough to recognize that my father hadn't rung up those strawberries on the customer's bill. And so I said, Dad, you forgot to ring those strawberries up. And he just looked at me and he said, Howard, not everything we do in life do we need to be paid for. These people are our friends and they're our neighbors, and I happen to know they can't afford to buy fresh fruit right now. So it's just my way of helping them out a little bit. I never forgot that. I didn't understand it. I really didn't understand it. But it's so true. Too often in life we think that we need to be recognized, we need to be rewarded, we need to be paid for things that we do. I don't believe that. I think that you do things because you want to do them. And sometimes you get paid more, sometimes you don't. But if you're doing the right things for the right reasons, it always comes back to you. It's karma. It just comes back to you. And so that's where I learned that lesson. And so I just learned that, and so when I did that, when I said that to Howard, I meant it. I said, don't pay me. You look at me, I'll look at you. So why not? It was the best week I ever spent. And, and it all worked out.
Wow.
It might not have worked out. Many times I've done things for nothing and I've got nothing back. But what I got was my own intrinsic rewards, So I didn't need somebody else to give me something.
Wow. What else did your father teach you that you still remember and carry with you in your bag of wisdom until today?
Let's see. He, this is more of a retail thing. There's an Italian word called abbondanza. And what it means is, you see it when you walk if you go into one of your markets, right? What you see is all the fruit piled high, right?
Yes.
And it's beautiful, isn't it? It makes you want to buy something. And that's what abbondanza is about. My dad was the best merchant. He would pile all the fruit high and make it beautiful, and people would want to buy it. And so I learned lots of retail skills. I learned how to hire people. I learned how to run advertisements. I learned how to do bookkeeping. I learned so many little things from my father that just carried me. I learned how to make a retail store profitable. Those skills, all the skills that he had, I observed and I learned from him. And that helped me along the way.
So you mentioned the important word in here is observe, right? Yes, and my coach and mentor always tell me that opportunities are out there in front of our eyes every day, and then it's running with different speed. So our ability first is to observe and see those things. So over the years,
to be curious. I was always curious. Luck is where opportunity meets preparation, right? Yes. So you got to be prepared, but you also got to be ready to take the opportunity when it comes along. And Starbucks was just that. The opportunity came along and then it came back. And by that time I was ready to take the opportunity. But I was lucky that I got the opportunity a second time. You know, that was talk about what are the odds of that happening? Not very good.
And where is curiosity coming from in you?
I don't know. I just was always curious. I was the baby of the family, and so I was always around adults, right? And I was always, you know, they were always having conversations, and I'd always wonder what they were talking about. So I would ask questions, and I've been curious the rest of my life. I'm interested in things. If I meet somebody new, I want like you. I want to know, where did you come from? How did you grow up? I'm the same way you're asking me questions. I like to ask people questions, and I grow from that. I learn from that, and so curiosity breeds curiosity.
So, how can we help people to build the curiosity competency, Howard?
Well, they have to want to. They have to really understand that the best way to grow is to be curious about different things, is to ask people questions, to read books, to dig into the things that make you wonder about life. You know, whatever it is you're curious about. It doesn't have to be about work. It can be about hobbies. You know, maybe you want to be really good at flying kites. Learn who are the best kite flyers in the world. And you go in and you go out today, you can go on the internet. In my days, when I was your age, there was no internet. You had to go to the library and get a book, you know. And now I can go on the internet. If I have a question or I'm curious about something, I can go right into AI. I can go into Google. I can find an answer. It's amazing.
Yeah. So the second time came back to Starbucks and had the 21 years spent there with phenomenal, growth and achievements. Okay. And then the background remains the same. You didn't have education, and the college degree, right? You didn't have the experience in the coffee industry. So what makes it different for you to have, to come back the second time and move all the way to become the president of the North America and international for Starbucks?
I'm not. Help me understand your question about it.
My question was, what makes it different when you come back the second time and you really have a successful journey at Starbucks?
Yeah, well, I didn't know that it was going to work out. You know, he may have. I just was saying, okay, I'm interested. I got the opportunity to take a look at Starbucks too. Remember, so not only did folks get an opportunity to look at me, but I got an opportunity to look at Starbucks, and I fell in love with Starbucks during that week. I met lots of great people, and I said, this is my kind of place. And so I was just lucky that it all worked out, but I didn't know if it was going to work out. I just, I was doing what I wanted to do and not worrying about, I said, it'll take care of itself. Whatever's supposed to be here will be. And that's exactly what happened. And then I latched onto the opportunity, and I was good at what I did, and I learned and I grew. I had to grow. I'd never run anything as big as Starbucks became. I had to grow as a leader and grow as a human being, and I did. And so I still was curious. If I was having a problem with something, I called somebody up that had more experience than I did in doing what they were doing. When I started Starbucks International, I talked to 50 people that had done it before so that I could learn and understand how to help make it work. And all those things helped me to grow myself, number one. And remember when I said you got, number one, grow, became a better human being, I became a better professional, and I helped my people achieve their goals. And as I grew at Starbucks, I helped the company grow.
And you mentioned earlier also that since then you started to have goals in your life.
Oh, sure.
Yes, a lot of people say goal setting to be successful, we have to have goal setting and learn how to be doing that at young age. And you seem to be doing it in the middle of 30s, 40s, right?
I started with goals when I was in my late 20s, writing down and I always had a 5-year plan. I'm 80 years old. I still have a 5-year plan. That's starting to get pretty optimistic that I'll be around, but I just think that if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. And so I believe in living your life with intention. And that's part of what goal setting is about. Be intentional about how you spend your time. All we have is hopefully our health, and we have time. But, we can't necessarily control either one. We can do as best as we can with our health, but it's time. And so, I just was trying to, I want to achieve the things that are important to me in my life, and I continue to do that. I continue to focus on the things that I believe are important. They've changed over time. In my early days, it was about accumulating wealth. Now it's not. Now it's more about giving away my wealth. And but I continue to want to learn. I continue to want to grow and be a better human being.
Oh, one of my project is to share the collective wisdom of the 50 amazing people around the world, and we want to ask you about how, after many years of setting goals for yourself, right? What is the best way that you are using or doing to or applying when you set goals for yourself, especially when the 5-year goals like this?
Well, I write them all down. If you don't write them down, they're worthless. Then they're just wishes, hopes, and dreams. And so I have goals across a spectrum of subjects, from spirituality to material well-being, to economic well-being, to personal growth, to health, to my children, to my marriage, to my grandchildren. I have travel, life experiences, learning. I have goals under each of those. Maybe it's 1, 2, or 3 goals under each of those. And then I focus on achieving those goals. But, for almost 50 years, I've had this document. You're not going to be able to read it. But this document is a picture, what I call a picture in Howard of 50 words or less, right? And on this document has my mission statement. This is why I'm here. So here's my mission statement. To live my life every day, nurturing and inspiring the human spirit, beginning with myself first and then for others. To live my life every day, nurturing and inspiring the human spirit, beginning with myself first and then for others. So my mission in life is to nurture and inspire the human spirit. Then I have core values. I have 8 core values. First core value is honesty. Everything I do in my life, I have to be honest. Then the second core value is fairness. I believe in treating people with fairness. And then the third core value is respect for self and others. And the fourth core value is responsibility. I take responsibility and accountability for everything I do. And then the fifth core value is integrity. That what I say I'm going to do, I do. People can depend on me. And then the sixth core values is trust in self and others. I give trust before I get trust. Then the seventh core value is caring. I mean real caring. Caring when it costs you. Everybody says they care, but caring only matters when it costs you something, either time or money or emotions. And then the eighth core value is love. I give love to all of those that I come into contact with.
Wow.
And then I have what I call my 6 Ps. This is how I do everything. The first P is everything I do in my life has to have a purpose greater than myself. It has to be bigger than me. It's about serving others. The second P is if I have a purpose greater than myself, then I darn well better be passionate about it. I better use all my energy. I get up in the morning ready to go, you know. And then the third P is persistence. In the rivers we call our lives, there are rocks, right? Some of those rocks are below the water level. We don't see them. And we going down the river and we crash right into them. And oh, what happened? And we got to learn to get over, around, or through those rocks. Sometimes those rocks are above the surface of the water. And we see them out there in the distance. And for some reason, we hit them anyway. Even though we can see them, we hit them anyway. And then there's those rocks that our parents or our teachers or our coaches tell us about, but we ignore them. So in life, you got to be persistent. Nothing happens without persistency because there's so many things that can get in our way. Sometimes we put them there ourselves. Sometimes other people put them there. Sometimes they're just there. And then the fourth P is patience. Not everything comes in the time frame that you want it to come in, you know, and it takes patience sometimes in life. And we have to have patience with ourselves, but we also have patience with others. That, you know, some people don't come along as fast as we'd like them to. So we have to have patience. We have to coach. We have to care about them. And then the fifth P is performance. Performance matters in this world. If we make a commitment to do something, then we darn well better do it. If we have children that play soccer and they want us to come to their soccer game and we agree to go to the soccer game, we better show up. You know, if we're married and we agree to have a monogamous relationship, then we better live up to that commitment or we shouldn't be married. If the simple things in life, like if my job in the house is to take out the garbage, then I better take out the garbage. I shouldn't have to have my wife tell me to take out the garbage. So performance matters. When you commit to your boss to get something done, then you got to live up to that commitment, or at least you need to tell them that you're not going to make it and you need help. And then the sixth P is people. Everything in life is about serving people. And so I stay focused on that document. This document drives my life. It holds me accountable. And on top of this, I have my goals.
Wow. Since when you have that document in your life?
Since I was 28.
Okay. And how did you come up with that document?
It changed over time. My mission statement was different. My values were a little bit different. I didn't have my 6 Ps. But over time, I kept working on it, making it better. And, you know, so yeah, but I've had it since my late 20s.
So if somebody listening to this conversation and want to have their piece, like the document like you, and so that they can use it as a North Star for them, right? Yeah. What baby steps should they take today to get it? Yes.
Well, first of all, they should think about why they're put on this earth. Why are they here? What are they here to do? It's bigger than making money for yourself, right? Why are you put on this earth? What is it? What do you want to be known for? When you retire someday, or you're in that rocking chair in the nursing home, what do you want people to have thought of you? How do you want to have thought of yourself? Again, live your life with intention. And so I want to be in that rocking chair and say, did I accomplish everything I set out to do? No. But I certainly nurtured and inspired the human spirit of those that I came into contact with. So create a mission for yourself. How do you want to live your life? What are you trying to do with your life? And then you can go on the internet and you can say human values. And there'll be a list of 300 words that represent human values. Okay, first get it down to 50. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, but you keep working it down till you get to what I call 8 core values. This means from hell or high water, these are the values of live life. My first one is honesty. No matter what, you ask me a question, you're going to get an honest answer from me. I won't lie to you. You may not like my answer, but I'm going to tell you what I think. You know, and so I identified my 8 core values. It doesn't mean that out of those 300 words, there might be 50 or 100 that relate to you in some way, but get it down to the core ones, the ones that really matter to you. And then I write a paragraph or some sentences about how you want to live your life. That's where my 6 Ps came in. And anybody can do this. It takes time, but you have to have discipline. It may take you 6 months to get this work done, but you got to keep working on it. But you got to write it down. If you don't write any of this down, it's worthless. You're not committed.
That's one thing that you mentioned in here is very important, is do it every day, right? Yeah. So we have a good days and we have a lot of bad days also. Yeah. So what can we do? How could you do it every day, Howard?
I have this document, it sits right up here. I have a bulletin board right in front of me next to my computer. I look at it every day. Every day. You know, and why? Because sometimes when things are good, I can get a little cocky, you know, less humble. And I have to remember about nurturing and inspiring. And sometimes things go bad and I can think everything's going to be bad. So I look at this to keep me going.
So your parents, when they came to America, they spoke zero English, right? They barely speak English. And they grow the family up beautifully. And now you have, you know, you've been traveling the world, leading organization and be a member, teaching leaders to become, you know, more of the servant leaders themselves. So how do you define wisdom in your life when you know so many amazing people like this?
How do wisdom to me is knowing that you don't know, right?
Mm.
Understanding that you don't know everything. And wisdom comes from listening to other people, listening to what they really say, and being in tune with who they are. And wisdom comes from your life experiences, you know. But you don't have to experience everything to. You don't have to have somebody. You don't have to have somebody tell you don't touch the stove if you can see the stove is hot, you know. But wisdom comes from learning to listen to people when they say, Howard, the stove might be hot, be careful. And so wisdom is living a life full of curiosity, willing to learn, willing to grow, and understanding that you don't have all the answers.
And what can we do to help, like connecting the wisdom from the young generations to the next generations to bridging that gap of separations of ideas?
Well, I think that the key to understanding how to bridge that generation gap is to, again, go back to being curious. That both you, the older person has to not just be the lecturer, right? The older person has to be curious about what's the younger person think, right? So I learn as much from young people as I learn from old people. So you have to be able to listen and be curious about where that young person is coming from before you can start to impart wisdom, so to speak. And then when they ask you a question, right? If they want to ask you a question, that's the only time you give an answer. Otherwise, you're not constantly giving them advice. There's a two-word quote that I love. I learned a long time ago. It's called compassionate emptiness. Compassionate emptiness. It means being full of compassion but empty of solutions. So you're married, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so your wife, when you meet up, and she's talking to you about her day and about all the issues that she faced, she wants you to listen. She doesn't want you to give her solutions. She wants you to listen. When your kids talk about their problems, they just want you to listen. They don't want your solutions. And so compassion and emptiness is full of compassion for how your wife is feeling, but empty of solutions, unless she asks for your input, unless your children ask for their input. All too often in this world, we rush in, particularly men. We want to provide solutions for the world, and particularly for our children and our wives, you know?
All right, I have two last questions for this conversation today. Okay.
Yeah.
So since you mentioned my wife and I, we've been on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, because we believe that our thinking capability has been diminishing for so many things in our lives, right? So every conversation like this, we will ask this question, and we're going to ask you now. So Howard, how have you been growing your ability to think over the years?
Am I growing my ability to think over the years?
Yes.
Well, I'm an incessant reader, right? So I read about things I'm interested in. I still read a lot about leadership, although less of that than I used to. I think it's that. I think that I've exposed myself. I go back to that curious word, being curious. You learn to think by being curious about things, because when you're curious about things, you run into opinions that are not the same as yours, right? And you run into ideas that you didn't have any idea about. You meet people that you've never met before with totally different views of the world. And so that's how you learn to think, by being challenged by other people's thoughts and how they think about the world. And that kind of forces you to think differently. And so that's, it's always a struggle, because we're always attached to our own opinions. We all, our lives, and we say, well, this is what I think and I'm right. But, as you get older, you realize you're not right all the time. Most of the time you're wrong. And it's important that you listen to other people, you read, you're constantly curious, you're trying to grow yourself, take classes, and things that you're interested in, and just continue growing. You don't want to stop. When you stop growing as a human being, it means you stop living.
Wow. The last question. I want to travel with you one more time. Okay. So we're going to travel to that grocery store where you were a little boy carrying that strawberry and, to put into the bag for your customers. And then your father forgot to, decided not to charge the customer for that. Remember that moment. All right. Yeah. And if you have a chance to talk to him and tell him about your journey up until today, and something you want to tell him about that journey at that moment, what would you say to your father?
Yeah, my father died 54 years ago.
Yes.
When I was 24 years old or 26 years old. And, he would never believe. He would never believe what my life, right? I mean, they had nothing. They lived during the Depression. They never had a lot, but we had enough, and he would not believe what's happened in my life. And, it's emotional for me because I never got to show him. He was dead before I really got going in my career. But that's a tough question. I hope he would be proud. I think he would be.
And I'm sure he is. You are an amazing leader, and we're thankful for being role model for a lot of us to continue being servant leaders and continue serving others. So I would thank you very much for doing that. Okay.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. You're a long way across the world, and it's night. Is it nighttime for you? What time of day is it there now?
It is 8 o'clock in the morning, and I travel to Seattle very often because my children live there, and my youngest daughter, she's gonna be going to Seattle for high school also next year. So, the next time that we came to the city, if you're around, we would love to have a cup of Starbucks with you. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You have a wonderful day. Say hello to your family for us, please.
Same to you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.